Good evening, everyone. Another episode of the Golden Goal Fantasy Football Podcast. Last week we covered the goalkeepers and defenders and just a review of their prices and the players in FanTeam. And this week we've got the midfielders and the strikers, and then answering some of your Twitter questions. And as always, I'm joined by my good mate Sam. How you getting on, mate?
Yeah, very well, thanks, mate. What about yourself?
Yeah, just looking forward to the season starting, really. I'm trying to... It's hard not to, isn't it? It's an addictive thing to tinker with your team, but I'm trying not to do too much until all the transfers and we know injury status, etc., before the start of the season, because my team is chopping and changing all the time in response to that.
Yeah, I've been pretty good, mate. I know we've had a few conversations, but I've been pretty good at not doing too much. I've had, obviously, I think I've only been in twice or three times to play with my team. For multiple reasons, but the same as you, I think everything's going to become much more apparent in that kind of run up to the season. Obviously, you want to have an idea of structure, hence why we're running the pods now. But actual kind of definite team and bench, I'm not there yet, and I don't proclaim to be. But I will be in the run up for sure.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get another pod out next week where we go over some drafts, and I won't mention who it is yet, but we're hoping to have a very special guest on as well. Right, shall I get into it? So if you guys caught the last episode, I literally flashed up all the tagged players in each position on the screen. I didn't run through them one by one, but essentially Sam and I just picked out the key ones that we were interested in. So starting out with the most expensive, and then going down to the real cheapies. So first up, mate, we've got our first page of midfielders. And just for people wondering why players are in different colours, it's just because they were in my team at the time that I took these screenshots. So you get a bit of a hint as to who I've selected in my team. But yeah, mate, just looking at those premium midfielders from about 12.5 million to 6, who gets your eye in that really? Who are you liking the look of?
Yeah, you've given away your team secrets there, Tom, haven't you? With your green in the background. Well, I think there's obviously some obvious choices in there. I don't know what, Salah, kind of De Bruyne, Son, those sorts of players. I mean, what's your sort of thinking in terms of how many kind of those sort of players you're going to have in your team and that sort of stuff? I think they're such obvious picks, and we know how good they are. But the difficulty is going to be is how to fit them into a structure, isn't it?
Yeah, so probably worth going into it now. So and we'll look at it when we see all the strikers. But the interesting thing that FanTeam have done this season for me is the minimum price midfielders of 4.5 million. And there are 4.5 million midfielders that you can pretty much bank on to start every game and at least score some points. But in the striker position, the lowest price is 5 million. And I don't think there is a starting striker that you can have for 5 million. Which in a weird and about way, I think almost makes midfielders almost makes strikers 0.5 million cheaper than midfielders because the minimum is higher. I don't know if that makes sense, but in my head, yeah. That's how I'm picking it. So in terms of structure, I think I'm going with Mo Salah. I think he's the most locked player in that lot for me, and he'll be my captain on the first week. And then really, I think I'm digging around the 6 millions for one player. So I think they're both together on this list, but I think one of Neto and Martinelli will be in, and then I'm liking the midfielders in and around 7 and 7.5 as well. I really like the look of Jadon Sancho. I think he's likely to play every game that he's fit for, and just during pre-season, he's looked like the Jadon Sancho that we thought we were signing last season. He just looks pretty shit hot, to be honest.
Yeah, he does. He just looks good. As pains me to say it's a Liverpool fan, but he's at least made a good start to the pre-season. There looks like some chemistry between Rashford, Martial been playing as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has been playing. He's been looking good as well. We might get into him in a minute.
Sancho, and you can see Ten Hag's philosophy coming across. I think you bang on there with Salah. Like for me, Salah's a lock. I think I've been looking and engaging with a lot of FanTeam managers that are engaged, and I think the consensus I've seen for majority is kind of Salah's a lock in there. the way I look at it with the fixtures. So this is the way I'm sort of, and I know this. We're looking at midfielders and forwards, but it's kind of this is how I go through it. My thought process. Salah's a lock for me. Man City, there's kind of in that kind of premium category. There's kind of for me, there's kind of three standouts. I mean, you Cancelo defensively. I know we've gone over the defenders. If you count him as a premium in that defense slot, you would. And then it's then either De Bruyne or Haaland.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a decision between, one of those. In my head, mixed in with the fact then you go to choose between Son and Harry Kane, and it's just deciding with the fixtures and depending how you play the game, ownership, who you go with out of those four to go alongside Salah. At the moment, I'm kind of sat on Salah and then Harry Kane up front, and then mixed in with quite a few 6 million midfielders in and around with sort of the 7 to 8 marks. I think there's a few nice players into there as well, Tom, for that price category. Sorry, mate, I don't know if you've got anything to add.
Just thinking, I'm very similar to you. Like I said before about the strikers almost being cheaper than the midfielders because of the minimum in the price bracket. I've actually got 3 up top. So I think
it's really frustrating, isn't it?
It is.
At the moment, because there isn't an apparent striker, is there?
No, exactly. And we'll get on to the cheapy mids when we get through the list. But yeah, I've got 3 up front at the moment, I think. I've got Haaland, Gabriel Jesus and Callum Wilson.
Nice.
And then I've not even got Cancelo as a premium from Man City. I've actually gone for like the Ruben Diaz sort of price. I think the most expensive of my defenders is 6.5 million. I've stayed away from the premiums and spent my money in midfield and attack. Whether that comes to bite me, I guess we'll find out. But that's my structure at the moment.
I quite like it, mate. And I think it's one of the questions when I looked last night, and it's it's loosely around one of the questions, whether it's directly one of the questions. With the issue of not knowing if there's, at the moment, as of this minute of the video, whether there's a starting striker at that 5 million spot, and you go in to put 2 strikers in because you want to go with one up top, like a Haaland or a Kane, you've deaded 2 spots. And then if there's some players that are not starting, and if you've gone with some 6 million midfielders like a Martinelli and a Neto who both don't start, or one of them starts, you're struggling game one, aren't you? And that's where I'm at the moment currently waiting for more information, because my bench has been basically pathetic with the strike force that I've currently put together, and one benching, and I've got basically 10 players playing. I know we're going to go into strikers, and I think I've got Mateta sat on my bench at the moment, which we'll obviously come to later on. But I would like to have some more information on if there will be a starting £5 million striker, and maybe we'll be able to see that. Otherwise, you leave your bench very, very weak.
Yeah, and just in terms of we'll get onto the players. Just thinking for the viewers' interest, my bench at the moment, I'm not hard locked into the players, but it's going to be a 4.5 million defender that I know is nailed. So at the moment,
there's loads of good alternatives as well. There's a good option
there. Yeah, I've got Connor Cody there at the moment, but I think that could be anyone. Then I've got Dewsbury Hall as the 4.5 million mid, and then I've got Perraud from Southampton as a 4.0. I think 2 4.5s that play regularly, and trying to find a starting 4.0. That's a good way of maximising the money you can spend on the rest of your team.
Yeah, no, I like that, Tom.
Go for
it. I was going to say, because like Salah, De Bruyne and Heung-min Son sort of speak for themselves. What's your thought process in that kind of, completely that bracket underneath? So maybe anything from kind of 7 or 7.5 million up to that kind of 9.5 million, because I think there's some really, really good options in there.
There are, and one thing it's the same in FPL and Sky and all the games we play. Jared Bowen had an amazing season last year, and if he replicates the numbers that he got last season, I think 8 million in this game is still a really good price for him. I can't remember what he was priced last year. I think he was 6 or 6.5, and obviously he was amazing. But I still think if he returns similar numbers, he's worth 8 million. And the one thing to think about is I think people are being put off by his opening fixture against Man City. But I think traditionally West Ham have done pretty well against Man City. And I'm pretty sure last game he scored a couple of goals against them as well. Because he loves to play on the break. And he destroyed them last time. So he's one that I've got my eye on for sure. At the moment, I've picked Jadon Sancho at 7.5, but I really like Bowen at 8. You got Phil Foden at 8 as well, who I think will play more minutes than he ever has for Man City. The only thing with Foden is I don't think he just doesn't get enough attacking returns to excite me. I've owned him in the past, and he's not blown me away with the amount of returns that he gets. Maybe that's part of his game that will improve.
I think it's mainly because City have had lots of their attacking returns spread throughout the team. Sometimes when I look at my teams and I think, why have I not got more City in there? It's for that exact reason. However, I think with Haaland coming in, Tom, if he stays fit and he plays regularly, there will be more attacking returns from an assist perspective for all that creative three or whatever Pep decides to play either side of Haaland. And you saw that against Bayern Munich. They had Grealish, who's looked really, really good in pre-season, had obviously the assist, and then there was another goal wrongly ruled out. I think it was Bernardo Silva. Someone will potentially correct me if I'm wrong, for Haaland in his first 45 minutes. And I think looking at the analysis, I watched it's a guy on YouTube for anyone that wants to maybe look at team analysis, like from an enjoyment perspective, but also an FPL perspective. It's Seniz or something, Seniz. I'll find out his name. It's Seniziz, something like that. I'll find the name and then I'll stick it in the comments because It is good to watch because it gives you an idea of potentially how teams are going to play, and it's really, really good football analysis. I said I watch it purely from a fantasy perspective, and the runs and stuff and the movements that Haaland were making, you could just see that there probably is going to be more solid attack and returns. Again, I might be totally wrong, Tom, and Haaland may be rotated and injured, but if he plays regularly, I think you're going to see some more output from Foden, Mahrez, Grealish more regularly, Bernardo Silva.
I'm just looking through that list of names as well. I mean, you've got Sterling at Chelsea, who I think could be quite interesting. I think he'll be their main man up front. Which position he plays in, I'm not sure, but I think he'll be a regular starter for them in whatever position in the front three they pick to choose him in. But I just don't feel like starting with him, mate. I don't know about you.
No, I'll definitely. He's 100% on my watch list, but judging, the only thing we have to judge at the moment is pre-season form, whether you like pre-seasons or not. That's the idea. That's the only thing we've got to go off. And Chelsea don't look very good in pre-season. The FanTeam guy Alex is a Chelsea fan, and I saw him tweeting about basically staying away from Chelsea assets at the moment, at least to start with. So I was going to go in the season with probably maybe Sterling initially and one of their defenders. At the moment, I've got no assets in any draft, but I think he's a really nice price, Tom, at 9 million. And his goals and assists over the last few years have been pretty damn good. He's an elite player that probably doesn't get maybe the coverage he deserves, maybe because he's been in and out of that City team a little bit. But I think, like you said, given a run, make him the main man. If Tuchel can get his system sorted, he'll be a snip at 9 million, mate.
Yeah, I agree. I think the same applies to Fernandes as well. He had quite a disappointing season last year, but previously he's been one of the most expensive midfielders in the game. But this year I think he's been priced pretty reasonably for his potential. So yeah, if Ten Hag can get him firing, I think 9.5 million is a really good price, especially with Ronaldo. I think he'll come back into the fold of the team. But at the moment, they seem to be doing okay without Ronaldo, which means that Fernandes is likely to be on penalties and probably take free kicks, etc. And to be honest, I hope he does over Ronaldo anyway, because I think he's better at them. But yeah, I just think Bruno Fernandes could become a factor. Not a sort of player I'd start with, but I think he could definitely become a factor, yeah. And same for Luis Diaz as well, I would say. A bit too expensive, I think, to start. My team structure just doesn't fit a 9.5 million mid along with Salah, which is a shame because I think he'll be awesome this season. It's just I just can't fit him in.
You're a United fan, Tom. I don't know if you've watched much of the pre-season stuff, but what do you think Ten Hag's going to do in relation to Bruno Fernandes' position? Is he going to be a little bit more of that kind of higher risk, kind of free in behind, where he's allowed to do what he does best, or is he going to be in a more of more of a sort of a deeper midfield role. I mean, what you got any ideas what you think
Yeah,
he's going to
to
how
be
he's going to
completely
utilise
honest,
him?
mate, I don't know because I think Christian Eriksen is going to be in our starting 11 as well, and we haven't seen him feature at all yet. So it's how Ten Hag decides to fit him in with Christian Eriksen and who can play in the holding midfield position. I think if we sign Frankie De Jong, I think our midfield three will be Frankie in like the sitting position, and then Bruno and Eriksen is like do they call it the eights? Is that it? The more forward like midfielders. I think it'll be Bruno and Eriksen in those positions, and I think he'll be given.
Yeah.
It's a bit less than like you'll be a bit less attacking than like the traditional number 10 position that Bruno does play, but I don't think it will affect his attacking returns too much.
Yeah, I just wonder if he's going to have that license to be creative and stuff. And if he is, I think he can do really well. And I think you're right. I think he's a watch and wait. Again, you stick him on that watch list, don't you? I know this has come up as a question, so may as well cover it. Going back to City, I really like Mahrez, Silva, Foden, and I really like Grealish at 7.5. The issue is just minutes, isn't it, with Man City? Like you've alluded to it, and that's why maybe FanTeam have priced it really well because Diaz is 9.5, but they're probably presuming that Diaz is going to play a high majority of the games where they've priced Foden, Silva, Grealish, yeah, and Mahrez all around that £7 to £8.5 million mark, haven't they? But then you get the rotation risk. I mean, like I said, I genuinely think there's going to be more attacking returns if Haaland's that focal point. Like, there's going to be no doubt about it, including De Bruyne as well, and the wing backs probably. But yeah, I don't like that midfield slot to be someone who's not going to play regularly.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't. Yeah, you don't want to spend that amount of money on a player that gets benched more often than he plays. Which then brings you on to like, I said I've got Sancho at 7.5, and I've seen Josh Waldridge, the previous champion. He's got James Ward-Prowse in his drafts at the moment. James Ward-Prowse is obviously a fan team legend because he gets 10 or so attacking returns pretty much every season just from his free kicks and penalties and assists, and he plays every single game. Rarely gets injured, and he plays 90 minutes every game. So that's the kind of player you can pick in FanTeam. And I think 7 million. I think last year it might have been 6.5, which made him slightly more attractive. But I think even at 7 million, he's still a good option. I might even end up starting with him and using the 0.5 million I've got in Sancho elsewhere. To be honest.
When I follow Josh, who's obviously done extremely well, and Alex, the FanTeam guy, and what they talk and what they say, they're both super hot on having those midfielders that just play 90 minutes. I mean, I know Josh is super hot on it, and that got me thinking about my team the other day when I had maybe two or three in my draft of a Neto and Martinelli, and it was just a little bit like very explosive players, but can be pulled out of that team, and suddenly, a key position in FanTeam is that midfield, and especially at the start of the season, we may have a weaker bench. We may have some more question marks about who's on the bench. I think you want to go in with fairly solid picks in that midfield, don't you?
Yeah, and we'll get onto it. I think it's tough, isn't it? With the 5 subs as well, it's hard to work out who those, in my opinion, it's hard to work out who those 90-minute mids are, other than like the defensive midfielders, for example, who like the Rodris, etc. You'd expect Rodri to just stay on the pitch all game, most games, but looking at all these expensive options, I could just see apart from maybe even Salah could get subbed in some games. It's just difficult to see a player that is free from being subbed when they have 5 subs to use.
Yeah, but I also I'm going one deeper than that, where I'm thinking there's a lot more rotation through the actual starting lineups.
Yeah.
Martinelli in particular. I mean, there's no doubt Martinelli's so explosive and so good, but so Smith Rowe's a really good player, and you sort of think that maybe Arteta will go between the two of them, and therefore you're starting. I can accept if Salah or whoever it is gets pinged off after 70, 75 minutes. More often than not, they've got you a return. They've done well for you already. But it's frustrating, isn't it? If you got Martinelli and a Neto in, and they've been playing, then suddenly they're benched, and you've got 2 midfielders down. And I think that's where those kind of enabler midfielders come in, which I'm sure we'll come to in a bit, Tom.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to quickly go through the rest of this list, just some players that I particularly like the look of.
Yeah, go for it, mate.
So in those 7.5 prices, Jadon Sancho and Kulusevski are the two that stand out for me. It's just how much Richarlison features for Spurs. It's looking like, for me, I still think Spurs' strongest front three is Son, Kane and Kulusevski, and Richarlison is going to have to work quite hard to get into the team. So I think Kulusevski is a perfectly good option to start with, especially because they got Southampton first game. I think they could win that 3 or 4-0, to be honest. Not sure about Gundogan. I think he's a bit too prone to not starting. And the season that he played in the centre-forward role, he was amazing, but he's not doing that anymore. They've actually got a centre-forward now. Yeah, I really like Ward-Prowse, as we said. I think Harvey Barnes, similar sort of minutes to Kulusevski and Sancho, I think, but 7 million is a good price for him. Tielemans, people did have him nailed as a 90-minute man. He could well be that this season, to be honest, but I just think he's a bit too expensive. Again, all the players below Tielemans there, I'm just not convinced they will start every game or get 90 minutes. Coutinho is obviously a good option, but he just never seems to last the full 90. He does tend to get subbed a bit early, despite being a really good player. I don't think we've seen Christian Eriksen enough at United yet to judge if he's the 90-minute man for them. We've got Perisic. It's a shame that he's a midfielder, I think. It'd be lovely if he was a defender. But yeah, just wouldn't go near him. Anyone else on that list? I think Neto and Martinelli are two of the standout picks at 6 million. Same with Souček as well, just on the 90-minute bonus. And I think that really covers it for this list. And yeah, Conor Gallagher there at the bottom. I think if he was still at Palace, I'd pick him for 6 million. But because he's at Chelsea now and doesn't seem to be getting loaned out, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think you've picked out some really good. You've picked out some good solid players there, Tom. I'll jump in and maybe just make a case for a couple of players that weren't mentioned there. I think James Maddison's got he's 8 million, so he's obviously a little bit higher. I think if you can fit him into your team structure, he had a really good season last year. Like, again, totally under the radar. It's not until I saw his goals and assists I realised how much of a good season he had. My thinking with Leicester is Leicester can only really be better than last year as long as they do keep their key men fit. They've been looking better in pre-season. I've been following some kind of diehard Leicester fans on Twitter, and by all accounts, they're looking much better. Harvey Barnes has done all right in pre-season. Vardy's has scored as well. So Maddison's probably going to play there. He's going to play probably the majority of games if he's fit, and he's good for goals and assists. So I really, really like Maddison as an 8 million. Mason Mount's obviously one to watch. Again, I don't think I'd particularly go in with him, Tom, judged off what we've just said, but I think he's definitely someone that could be watched. He's a solid player, isn't he? I think if Chelsea hit a nice formation and some form, he's good to bring in. He scores a lot of his goals against the bottom teams. I think I threw a stat in last year. I can't remember, in one of the group chats, about like half of his goals and assists have come against like
Norwich.
Exactly. So if you're targeting games and stuff, then obviously there's that as well. And then again, the same old issue with a bit of rotation, but obviously Odegaard, Smith Rowe, you'd like to think they would kick on. Maybe it's a watch and wait, Tom, and see kind of what formation Arteta goes with there. Even Nicolas Pepe at 6.5, people may laugh, but it's,
he could weave his way into the team, couldn't he? Quite easily.
Weave his way into the team, yeah. So yeah, I think there's so many good options. I think that's half the problem this year. Is just such an array. We only mentioned Saka. I think Saka at 8 million is like, is he on pens? I presume.
I think that's a bit of a mystery for Arsenal at the moment. But yeah, we haven't spoken about him. But again, I think he's on a level with Maddison in terms of attacking potential.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I've gone through that kind of list there, Tom. I think you've covered off quite a few there. So yeah, I think that's kind of really good around that mark.
I think one other noteworthy player on that list, he's not the best in terms of attacking returns, but he does seem to play every game for Leeds, and that's Jack Harrison. I actually don't think he's that bad, especially with no Rafinha now. I think his stock goes up a bit, to be honest.
Strange you mentioned that, because I was actually going to mention Jack, and if you get him, if you leave him all season, you'll catch a couple of his hauls. Did he have a hat trick last season?
Something like that. He strikes me as a player that will get between 10 and 15 attacking returns, and it's just as and when he gets them. Really, you wouldn't be able to predict when they happen, but you could leave him in your team, and he'll get you 10 or 15 across the season.
Was he at 6 million? It's not a bad shout at all. Not a bad shout at all. And you think if he can stay fit and play regularly, Tom, then there's something there for him.
All right, let's have a look at the rest of the players then, because I'm conscious we've spent. Well, those are the most important ones anyway, so it's right that we spent the most time on those. So yeah, just looking at these are 6 million and 5.5 million sort of players. I'm just looking on that page on the left. Buendia is a good price for Villa if he actually plays football. Don't mind Brennan Johnson for Nottingham Forest. He seems to be like their main man in terms of he's on all the set pieces. So yeah, don't mind him at that price. Sinistera. Sorry, mate. You go for it.
Just going to say Bruno G's the massive standout on that left-hand side, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think he will be the James Ward-Prowse this season. He'll be that Tielemans of a couple of seasons ago, kind of multiple routes to points. Seems like focal point in that midfield. Again, you don't know this with true confidence, but you think he's just staple name on the team sheet. You're going to come out with 4 or 5 points a game from him, something like that, really regularly, and you just set a true set and forget.
Yeah, because I quite like Newcastle seem to be pretty tight defensively as well. So I think midfielders get 1 point for a clean sheet or half a point. I can't remember the exact scores, but you get some points for a clean sheet. He seems to be pretty good on the attacking returns front and shots on target, so there's points there. And of course the 90-minute points as well. I'd just like to think he really impressed last season, so I think he's the best player Newcastle have now, and I think he's the main man, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. I'm almost certainly going to start with him, Tom, and then probably one of Neto or Martinelli.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same.
Yeah, I mean, like we all said, this chat helps me and you kind of formulate our teams, doesn't it? You got any love for Jesse Lingard at 5.5 million?
I do. I think it's a wait and see on Forest because we just don't know how they're going to play. I think another thing to consider with them is they have signed a lot of players and they will have 4 or 5 new faces in their starting 11. Their manager comes really well regarded in terms of like man management, etc. So I do think they'll gel, but in the past when we've seen, I can't remember, just examples of like QPR and Fulham that have signed 7 or 8 new players and they just couldn't bed them in properly. So I think it's a wait and see, but yeah, 5.5 million for Jesse Lingard at Nottingham Forest. And I think the thing with Lingard is at United, I think the opposition played to Jesse's weaknesses when he was at United. They sat really deep, which meant he couldn't run in behind. And that's why we saw the best of him at West Ham, because the opposition played largely a high line and he could get in behind. And I think we'll see the same at Forest as well. They'll play to his strengths, but I think it's a wait and see.
Yeah, if you want, actually, that reminds me, I'll plug another fantasy pod here, but James, the Planet FBL boys have done Correspondence Week, haven't they? And I think maybe really worth watching some of those kind of less familiar teams to us, like Forest. I think the Forest one was premiered last night. Well, I haven't watched it yet, but it's on my watch list just so I can get a little bit more kind of inside information on potentially how Forest are going to look. Yates is back in the team tonight, isn't he, Tom? Back in the squad, for tonight's game. So Yates was supposedly one of their kind of midfield enablers or whatever else, and but then got an injury and was supposed to be out for a while, but it's back in the team. So yeah, if anyone wants someone cheap and cheerful, that's another one to look at.
And then Sinistera is supposedly like the Rafinha replacement. But again, I think that's a wait and see, really. I think if he's anywhere near the level of Rafinha, 6 million is a good price. But I think to start with, I'd prefer Harrison, just because you almost know what you're getting with Harrison. Just on that middle column there, mate, I'm seeing... Just go for it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you're just looking for some players that are going to play 90 minutes, you've got... I mean, if Decore can keep fit, he's not a bad... I won't go with any Everton to start with, but Decore is a good player. So potentially stick him on the watch list. João Moutinho again, maybe. Jorginho. There's kind of a few in there that I don't know, maybe we mentioned but never go for, but are half decent picks.
I don't mind John
Um,
McGinn either for that 90-minute factor. Same with Ramsey at Villa as well.
yeah,
Those two don't. Just not sure I'd spend. I'd prefer to find a 4.5 million that was nailed than spend 5.5 on a centre mid. I think.
it's that funny price point, and I probably won't go with any of those there. But if you are looking for, like you said, you are looking for a 5.5, and there's a couple of options there.
And I think towards the bottom of that right-hand column as well, you've got Leon Bailey for Villa, who seems to be smashing it up in pre-season and is likely to start the first few games. I think they've got a decent run of fixtures to start as well, Villa, so don't hate Bailey. Don't think I'll start with him myself. I think I'll prefer, like you said, Bruno G and a Neto. And also Wissa for Brentford as well. I think with the loss of Ericsson, I think he's likely to play some more games. And he's looked pretty good when he has played for Brentford, scored a few goals, so one to watch, I think, at 5.5.
I think Harvey Elliott as well, obviously been a Liverpool fan, Tom. He started last season in that right-sided kind of 8 and interlinked really well with Salah and Trent. Then he did the awful injury at Leeds and never got back in the team, but he's looked super sharp in pre-season. And there's a little bit of talk that he's going to start the season for Liverpool. So whether we see that happen or not, he's definitely sticking on your watch list. I know he would take up one of 3 valuable spots in that Liverpool team. But if it comes apparent that Harvey Elliott's going to be a starter, he would definitely want to bring in. And at 5.5, you could have a Liverpool kind of starting player at an absolute game breaking price. So I think definitely not one to start with, but like Bailey, one to kind of really keep an eye on those in those early four or so game weeks.
Yeah, good suggestion, mate. Thank you. And then just looking at the next 3, I think this is the more like boring picks, really. Mostly 5.5 million sort of centre defensive midfielders who regularly play but don't score the most points. I think I remember last year, I don't have the last season's total points in front of me, but I'm pretty sure Rodri for Man City was among the top scoring midfielders just because he played 90 minutes a lot, kept a lot of clean sheets and got the odd attack in return. And that alone, in terms of, I think, points per million as well, he was one of the best players in the game. But I just don't think I could spend 5 million on Rodri. I don't know about you.
Yeah, and the issue for me now with that is obviously the signing of Calvin Phillips. I think if you'd have said to me that there was no Calvin Phillips and that Rodri was going to be the kind of the equivalent of a James Ward-Prowse at 5 million, because Rodri's banging in goals as well, Tom, isn't he? He's got an eye for goal, maybe not to the same quite level of James Ward-Prowse, but with all those clean sheet midfield points, I would have snapped your hand off for him at 5 million if I knew he was going to play 35, 36 games or whatever. But with Phillips coming in, it's just kind of taken the edge off for me there for Rodri. And again, he does take up a valuable spot.
He takes up a Man City spot, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But yeah, to be completely honest, mate, I'm not particularly liking any of the assets I'm looking at here. I mean, the one name is Podence. If he can get himself nailed in the Wolves team for 5 million, it's not bad. But he's just never shown a consistent run of keeping fit, staying in the team and scoring goals. So yeah, I'm just not sure about him. But at 5 million, he could be good value.
Yeah, mate, exactly. I think, I'm not going to mention anyone else on there because there's probably no need. I think from those previous pages, there's so many picks, isn't there?
Right, we've got a couple more of these pages to go through, I'm afraid, but I think we get into the 4.5s.
Midfielders.
Yeah, next page starts with Anthony Gordon at 5 million. He could be an option at that price if he stays with Everton. He's probably the best, in my opinion, the best 5.0. But again, I don't think I'll be picking him. Just looking at the rest of that list, don't think there's anything in that left-hand column for me. And once you get into the 4.5s, I think first name is Gibbs White. I think the Wolves fans are really liking him and want him to be in the team. So yeah, if he plays most games for Wolves at 4.5 and he's a number 10 as well. He's an attacking mid, so he's good value at 4.5. Moda for Brighton, I'm pretty sure he'll get himself into the team a bit more than he has been, but I think there are better options which we'll see on later pages. But that's not really much of interest on this lot, mate, I don't think.
No, you've mentioned the couple of players that I was going to say, so yeah.
I'll let you take the next one if you want. I'm just going to flash the final couple of pages up.
Yeah, so I don't know which. Yeah, I'm presuming you've got the
Ju-
page with Dewsbury Hall.
yeah, he's my
Yeah,
pick personally of the 4.5s.
I think he's a starter, isn't he? And he's good for return. So yeah, he's my absolute pick. I think he will be in my team. The great thing with him is, by the looks of it, you'll be able to start him or have him off the bench. So yeah, I think he's a definite enabler in there, Tom, for sure. Is there anyone else that you kind of?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure Christie is a starting winger for Bournemouth as well. I think he played over 30 games for Bournemouth last year in the Championship. I don't think his attacking returns were great, but I think he is in the first team in like an attacking sort of position for Bournemouth. So yeah, you could do worse than him. Certainly when I've had a team with two 4.5 million mids, I've picked Dewsbury Hall and Christie so far.
Yeah, yeah. And then if you were going to go for the one, then the obvious choice would just be
Dewsbury Hall. Yeah.
Dewsbury Hall. Yeah, cool.
That ends us for the mids, but yeah, you can see he's highlighted. I've got Dewsbury Hall in my team here. Strikers quickly. So we've got 2 lists on each page. So again, a giveaway as to who I've got in my team at the moment. But yeah, I mean, just looking at those premium strikers, mate, I'll let you do a bit of talking here. Who are you liking out of that list of strikers?
Haaland and Kane. Um, Kane started pre-season really well, hasn't he? Has been a slow starter, but I can't remember which pod I was listening to. But the conversation of when he does slow start, it's usually off the back of a tournament, comes back, kind of chucked in, and Kane needs rhythm to build. He's definitely building that in pre-season. I saw a couple of his goals. He scored an absolute belter against Rangers as well, didn't he? Kane really interests me, and I like the fact that Conte's now got his stamp on the team a little bit more. I've got more trust in Spurs, whether or not that's like the kiss of death. So I'm very inclined to start with Harry Kane over Haaland, but then it'd be like almost booking in a transfer. But this is what's going to make FanTeam so good this season. Haaland, I think, is going to be. I watched that kind of highlights of him in that first 45 minutes, Tom. I think he's against Bayern, wasn't it? I think he's going to be such a great buy. Thing for the question marks over him are not related to his footballing ability. It's his injury record, soft tissue injuries, and the protection that he'll get from Pep in terms of rotations, early pulls, all that sort of stuff. I want to make some honourable mention for Jamie Vardy, who predominantly starts seasons very, very well. And I think he finishes seasons very, very well. He obviously has that. He gets a good rest and then a nice build up into the new season. I saw he scored in friendly a couple of days ago. Again, it's an interesting price point, isn't it? That 9 million mark. I know that you've got one in at 9 million. I currently don't. But I think he's a really nice differential, and you can see him bagging a couple of goals against Brentford on game week 1 there, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Gabriel Jesus, I think, has been one of the most outstanding players during pre-season. I think he's had a goal every game he's played so far, and they've been good goals as well. Really good, tidy finishes.
Yeah, looks confident.
And I think he's 8 million FPL and 9 in FanTeam, but I still think he's good value for 9 million, to be honest. The nailed striker for a good Arsenal team. And we all know his potential. I think if he can stay fit all season, you've pretty much got 15 goals guaranteed out of him.
Yeah, his style suits the Premier League. He's a presser. He pushes. He'll do the leg work, but he's a good finisher. And I think a couple of the goals for Arsenal, the chip against Mendy, and then I can't remember who it was against, but maybe was it Palace? I don't know. I can't remember who they played before that. Again, someone will probably correct me if I'm wrong, but he brought the ball down on a sixpence in the box and then whipped it into
the touch and finish from a corner.
Yeah. Yeah, and just like those little things like that fill you with confidence as an FPL manager, because you're just thinking, like, if he gets on the end of them in the Premier League, then there's going to be goals. So he's a great pick, and I'm currently unsure at the moment whether he'll be in my team, but there's probably at the moment a high probability for the fact that there's a lack of. We talked about enabler, cheap strikers.
And then I got a question to ask you as a Liverpool fan, really. You've seen Darwin Núñez and Firmino in there at 9 and 8. Would you consider? I think Núñez, in my opinion, is probably the not nailed, but the more likely to start now. What do you make of Núñez?
Tell, mate.
Do you think it's hard to tell?
Oh, it's from a perspective. Is he going to be a good player? Is he a good player? Is he going to be good for Liverpool? Absolutely no doubt about it. Um, 4 goals against Leipzig. I know it's a friendly. I'm only going off what I've got. It's the chances that he gets. So he had a hatful against United, and he had quite a few against Palace, and none of that's where the compilation fails come in from rival fans. But you're looking at this and going, this is a lad that's just signed for Liverpool, doesn't speak the language, and is in pre-season. So that's what excites me. His movement is fantastic. He's big. He's strong. He can finish. That was 4 goals in 45 minutes, albeit some really poor goalkeeping, as you probably saw. Um, I think he fits in that same category as Vardy, where if you want a little bit of a differential striker at the start of the season, go for it. My concern is that Klopp will bleed him into the team. So it could be Bobby that starts opening game of the season. Bobby's looked good in pre-season. Potentially, fingers crossed, shook off, a couple of those niggling injuries from the back end of last season. Does he kind of do what he did with Andy Robertson, Fabinho, where he just beds them in over time? I don't know the answer to that. If I knew Nunes was nailed, I'd be starting with him. No doubt. No doubt at all. And those opening kind of few fixtures are plum, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Liverpool have Liverpool. It's funny because I've only got 2 Liverpool players in my fantasy team actually. But I was just going to say, I think as the team with starting fixtures and expected minutes, I think picking Liverpool players is the way to go. To be honest, I think they are less likely to be rotated than Man City players, and I think they've got slightly preferable fixtures as well.
Yeah, well, I think from you go back to the midfielders, I think obviously Salah's nailed, but Diaz is nailed because Jota's still struggling with the reoccurrence of his hamstring injury. I've not heard too much there, but you presume even if he's okay that he needs a bit more time to get up to speed. So there's no doubt Nunes is going to play because Bobby won't be playing kind of 90 minutes, especially with the speed at which the Premier League season starts and then the Champions League because of the World Cup. So like I said, I really, really do like Nunes, and if I had a sniff that he was going to start, then my draft might get ripped up. And the obvious place to look is this coming Saturday in the Community Shield, where we can look at both Man City and
Yeah.
Liverpool, how they set up and how they look against each other.
Yeah, because I think, well, it's talking about defenders, but I think the thing to note with Man City at the moment is a lot of their defenders are questionable in terms of their fitness. So
Yeah.
I haven't got his name on the screen or anything, but Laporte I think is only 6 million in FanTeam. But as far as I've heard, he's still recovering from the injury he had at the end of last season. And I also don't think that Diaz has played many minutes yet. So there's just lots of question marks around the Man City defence at the moment. If people didn't already know that.
Yeah, I'll just go quickly going on that one before we get back on topic. I've seen lots of talk about Nathan Ake starting the season. So maybe if you wanted someone Man City that's nailed at the start of the season, it looks like Ake's going to start, and then you can kind of rejig your team as the weeks go on. He might be a good shout. But yeah, I think the Community Shield for that one, Tom, will be a really good watch to see kind of solidify kind of what maybe Pep and Klopp are thinking for game week 1 potentially. We don't know, do we?
Yeah, and I just think looking at the sort of lower price bracket, so Martial in at 8, I think is a wait and see. But if he gets back to any sort of form that he's capable of, I think 8 is a good price. Nketiah, I think, has been priced as an Arsenal starter rather than the bench player that he's going to be now. Antonio, Richarlison, Tony, I think Richarlison a bit more prone to rotation. Antonio, not a bad shout, but I just think 7.5 is a bit too much for the form that he had at the end of last season. And I don't mind Tony at 7.5. I've got Wilson at the moment because I think his attacking output is better than Tony's. But if Wilson gets injured, which he inevitably will, I think I'll hop to someone like Tony or Bamford or one of those 7s that I know will play a lot.
That's the benefit about starting with one of those 7.5 million strikers is that if one of them does get injured or one shows himself as the clear standout for that slot, it's an easy, as long as you do it within a couple of game weeks, it's probably an easy move, isn't it? Like sideways. Like I said, I really like Tony. I like Antonio and Wilson. I think there's merits for all 3 of them. But if you get the wrong choice, then you do it quick enough. You can just hop on and get that cheapish forward. think Alvarez is a good shout, Tom. He's just 7.5. He isn't maybe not going to play like at least all the time, but I've heard really, really good stuff about him from people that have been watching over the summer. Again, probably not kind of one to start with, but
I think he muddies the water. I think Alvarez will muddy the water in terms of Grealish, Foden, and Mahrez as well. Because I think he can play. He's one of those versatile forwards that can play in any position in the front three as well. So I think he could just fit in anywhere. And it's 7.5. It's not bad, but yeah, I just think I'd veer away from that level of City player myself, just because you don't know if they're going to play.
yeah, I totally agree, Tom.
And spoken about those 7 million forwards, there's a good cohort of 4 sort of nailed forwards really. You got Calvert-Lewin, Jimenez, Bamford and Watkins. Any comments on those?
Yeah, you've got Mitrovic in there as well,
Mitrovic,
Tom.
apologies, mate. Yeah.
Who's nailed. Calvert-Lewin for me. I know that you've had him in a couple of your drafts earlier. For me, not a bad player, but for me at the moment, absolute no-go. They don't look good at all, do they, Everton?
No.
And losing Richarlison, I would just leave that. Jimenez, even when Jimenez was at his best, he was never a 2 and 3 goal a game man, was he? It was always a single return. But I think if he gets back to anywhere near his best form, he could be good value at 7 million. Again, Bamford, he would definitely be a watch and wait. There's no doubt there's value there. We've seen that 2 seasons ago. I'd want to see that his injuries are behind him, Tom, and that he fits into that.
He's
that
not played a lot of football at all, has he? So
no. And I think Watkins has always been a good shout. Kind of shots on target. It has played lots of minutes. For me, probably not to start with, but I think there is good merit if you're looking at certain team structures and stuff to go with Ollie Watkins.
yeah, whenever I've watched a Villa game owning Ollie Watkins, it's been so frustrating because he gets himself in so many good positions. Even against like the likes of Liverpool, etc., he gives even like Van Dijk, he gives him quite a hard time in terms of his pace and physicality. But when he gets into the box, he just like to just hit the post all the time or knock it wide. It's really frustrating. He does everything except for end product. So yeah, and same for Danny Ings isn't too bad at 7 either. He seems to have been playing a lot in pre-season, but again, his fitness is just a worry, isn't it?
Yes, mate. Absolutely. And like you said, Mitrovic, he's probably going to be nailed, isn't he? Yeah, nailed and.
Talk about 90 minutes as well. You'd expect Mitrovic to get 90 minutes most games.
Yeah, he just never translates his kind of championship form into the Premier League, does he? His returns sort of do obviously massively drop, but it's obviously down to the quality. But again, you just watch and wait. Kind of not too much more there. Maybe Solanke worth watching at best. I mean, 6.5 million, but he's not high on my list, Tom, but it'd be someone maybe I'm keeping an eye on if we had this kind of 30, 40 man watch list.
The one thing to consider, and I'm sure Iheanacho will be on the next list, but we all know Jamie Vardy has a period pretty much every season where he's out for a couple of months. So looking at the price, and Nacho's there at 8 million, isn't he? I just don't think that. I think the price difference between Daka and Iheanacho isn't fair. I think Daka could be as likely to start as Iheanacho. So if Jamie Vardy has a period of injury and Daka seems to be the favoured striker, I quite like 6.5. I also really like Daka as a player. I think he is the like-for-like replacement for Jamie Vardy once he does get too old to continue starting.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying there. I think, the Leicester have got some good attacking assets to definitely keep an eye on.
And you mentioned you got Edouard at the moment as well. I'll move on the list.
No, I've got Mateta. Sorry,
Mateta,
I don't know. I may have said Edouard earlier.
You probably did say Mateta, sorry.
5.5. Looks like he's going to play, but I think I did this last time when I used my wild card last season. I went with Mateta, and first game after the wild card, he was on the bench. But he's currently in one of my drafts on my bench, and whether or not that will change. But I think, he could be good value. We know Palace have gotten way more solid under Vieira, don't we? And I think we've talked about their defensive stats before, but I think they're just generally quite good value overall. So he's someone that's definitely on my watch list. And then I kind of look under that, Tom, and I don't really see too much more, if I'm honest with you.
No, I really don't. Looking at the 5.5s, I mean, Gelhardt might play some minutes. I think your man Zakiri for Brighton. He's a Brighton centre. He's a centre forward that Brighton have signed. Brighton traditionally have always had an issue with strikers, so I do feel like he'll get some minutes, but it's a real wait and see. But I think in terms of when you only have two strikers in your team, and you've got to pick a 5 million, I think just take your pick out of that lot. Really, I think all of them have their ups and down points. Really, I think Zakiri's probably the best in my opinion, but again, you don't even think he's going to play, so that's why I've got three strikers, because with three strikers, you can pick a 4 million defender that's nailed, a 4.5 million defender that's nailed, and a 4.5 million midfielder for your bench, and you can pretty much guarantee they'll all play. Whereas these 5.0 million strikers, not only they're more expensive than the minimums of other positions, they also don't play.
Yeah, and then they kind of the way they get you though, FanTeam, is the fact that you end up having to spend a little bit more on starting forward. So it's really well priced. And yeah, it gives some good food for thought for structure, definitely.
That's it for our list, mate. We did have a few Twitter questions. So thanks everyone that did ask some questions. I'll read out the first one, mate, and then feel free to answer it. I'll give you a little chance to speak. So yeah, we've mentioned him a couple of times, but our good mate Alexander, the FanTeam guy. So he's asked us, who are your favourite mids at 6.0 and cheaper? So he's named Neto, Aronson from Leeds, Dewsbury Hall, Bruno Guimaraes, Brennan Johnson, Lingard, Martinelli, Gordon. So yeah, all the good ones. And a guy, FPL Vegas, below has replied saying Harrison goes under the radar as well, which we mentioned.
Yeah.
So yeah, he says, with pricing this year, do you think you go for one or two of those under 6 million mids? What are your thoughts?
I think maybe two. But I might be totally wrong there, Tom, when we come to put the teams up, depending on what I do up front. I think there's a good merit there, like we said earlier, to maybe go with Bruno G and like a Neto or a Martinelli. I think Harrison's a really good shout as well. I really do like that. I think when Alex asked that question, I had like 3 or 4 in my draft, and I was like, of those players in my actual draft with the way I structured it, I was like, there's just too much risk in terms of like losing out on key points there through rotation in that midfield. So I think probably 2, with one being that more explosive option and one being that more safe option. I think Neto, if he stays injury free, Tom, could have a really, really good season.
Yeah, definitely. And I think on paper, in my opinion, he's the best Wolves attacking player. Like, just in terms of his raw talent, I think he's a really, really good player. But yeah, I don't really have any additions to your list, Alexander. I think you've identified all the good ones, and yeah, Bagos, Vegas. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's done Harrison as well, who we already mentioned. Yeah, it's just how much risk you want to take in terms of minutes, really. I think if you went with, I don't know, Dewsbury Hall, Bruno Guimaraes, and Harrison, you could be pretty much guaranteed that all 3 of those will start games. I think they're the safest, and then the likes of Neto and Martinelli have more upside, but probably a little less nailed.
Yeah, and that's maybe why a blend of the two, Tom's absolutely ideal. And again, it's going to be a little bit of not pot luck, because we make our own luck by watching pre-season, but seeing kind of who's looking good, who's starting. The thing is, Martinelli and Neto both look good in pre-season, so make of that what you will.
Next question. Sorry, mate, if I mispronounce your name. I absolutely hate doing that. But Chidubem, he's asked us, what formation are you playing, and are your bench players non-starters or starters in their respective teams? So at the moment, I've got, I think, a 3-4-3. So I've got 3 starting defence. I can go through my team, actually. I've got Martinez in goal and a 4.0 keeper. My defence is Van Dijk, Dyer, Diaz from Man City, and then I've got Cody and Perraud. So a 4.5 defender in Cody, and then a 4.0 in Perraud. And then I think you saw my midfielders from the list, and I've got Dewsbury Hall on the bench, and then I'm playing 3 strikers. So I've got, yeah, I'd like to think, how many is that? 14 players that will start pretty much every game.
Yeah, I don't quite know my formation, as I've already said at the moment, but I think going back, this is the question I alluded to earlier. I think if I go with the one up front, I don't want two dead £5 million forwards, or whatever the price is of them. It is five, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think for me, it might well end up being something like a 4-4-2 to start with, where I've got kind of two decent strikers, and then the bench has kind of at least two, what I perceive to be two starter midfielders. No, sorry, two starter players. Whether that's Dewsbury Hall or whatever, a 4.5 defender. To the best of my knowledge, they're starting to give me that little bit more coverage, at least at the start of the season. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, sounds good, mate. Next question from our good friend FPL Shenanigans. I think we already covered this really when we went through the mids, but he was just asking which midfielders do we think are under and overpriced. You got any thoughts coming away from what we've just looked at as to under or overpriced mids?
I think they've priced, because we sort of covered this as we went, didn't they? I think they've priced the midfielders really, like, all the pricing pretty nicely. Where you, like you said, you got those City explosive assets, but kind of just on that kind of price where it's like, do I go for Grealish at 7.5 when he might play 1 in 2? And yeah, I think they've got majority of it. I mean, the majority of them right from what I can see. Obviously, if he picks up any, feel free to stick them in the comments section and have a look. But within reason, I don't see too much out. Do you, Tom?
I really don't think there are many underpriced players in FanTeam this year. The ones that stick out to me are probably, just in my head, are Lingard and Dewsbury Hall are the two that I think could prove to be underpriced. Because I think 5.5 for a player of Lingard's ability and nailedness is a really good price, and the same for Dewsbury Hall as well. Those are
I forgot about Dewsbury Hall, and the fact that he played kind of a good amount last season as well suggests that maybe he could have been a little bit higher. But that's for us to jump on, isn't it? And I think there's always a good sign of players being underpriced when you see Twitter drafts floating around and you do your draft and everyone's got the same enabler on there. Whereas I think at the moment it's not quite that way. Maybe Dewsbury Hall is one of those, Tom. But apart from that, it's kind of like there isn't two or three I'm going, right, he's in because he's bang underpriced. So I think they've done well on it.
I've just had a disruptive thought come into my head as well. I'm pretty sure that Leicester played. It's interesting how Leicester will line up in midfield with all their players fit. So I'm pretty sure that Ndidi was injured for a lot of last season. So that's another player added into Rodgers' squad now that could take Dewsbury Hall's place. So I don't even think you can say Dewsbury Hall is nailed, but I still think he's the best 4.5 though. I don't think it changes that.
Yeah, for sure.
Couple more questions. Good mate Jack Sky Fantasies asked us a couple. So first one being, have you any thoughts on regards to your transfers? I mean, what tactic you're going to play with them? Are you going to try and stack a few or play aggressively?
I don't have not at the moment an overall tactic on it. I just try and pick what I perceive to be the best squad at the start of the season. I think what I will do, Tom, with price rises, this is what on paper anyway, is if there's any early standouts of players, try and get them in. If I've picked a 5.5, 4, I don't know, whatever it is, midfielder that's just not playing, or I don't know, whatever, and there's someone in and around that price range that's like, looks like he's starting, I made a good start to the season, can see them being a decent enabler, then I will definitely be aggressive with the moves. But at the moment, I don't really have any transfer strategy other than just to suss it after each week. I know that probably sounds like a bit of a cop out, but that's potentially the way I'm gonna play from the start. So I'm basically, to sum it up, I'll be aggressive if I need to be, but if I am happy with my team and I can see some consistent returns 2, 3, 4 weeks later down the line, then I'm happy to stack the transfers up. I think that's a really cool addition this year, of that ability to do that.
Yep. He's also asked, I can't disagree with what you said, mate. I think that's absolutely fair. Yeah. I just think it's, I wouldn't say naive, but to go into the season with a planned tactic for transfers when you get one every week and you just don't know what's going to happen, I don't think you can make a tactic, really. I just think some ways you've just got to play it as it goes, haven't you?
Yes, Matt, exactly. Yeah.
Because
every season is different, isn't it?
Exactly. I think you've already spoken about Nunes. And Yakubu has kindly asked us 3 questions in one tweet. So thank you, mate. You've given us a couple of difficult ones as well. So yeah, hopefully we can answer it to a good standard. So his first question, mate, is best Man City assets.
Edison, Cancelo, Diaz, Kevin De Bruyne, Haaland. Because it's nailedness, isn't it? But could you even put Haaland in that? I'm gonna put him in there because I just think he's going to be that good. But yeah, they're the ones for me. I don't doesn't mean for any second I don't think Foden, Grealish, Mahrez are not good assets. It's just the rotation risk around some of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't disagree with anything you said there. The only reason I've got Haaland at the moment is because I plan to captain him game week 2. I think they've got Bournemouth and Liverpool have Crystal Palace. And Crystal Palace are pretty good defensively, so I would fancy Haaland to outscore like the likes of Salah in that game. So yeah, I like
If he
Edison, Diaz, De Bruyne, Cancelo, and Haaland. Yeah, I agree. They're the best. And then he asks us, I'm not a big FPL player, mate, so I'm not great on the bonus point scoring, but I think it still helps answer the question anyway. His second question is differences that the lack of FPL bonus points has on FanTeam, and then the effect that the bonus system does. So you get bonus points for shots on target and 90 minutes, and how that impacts sort of positions. I'm happy to take this one. I think with the bonus point system in FPL, the important difference in FanTeam is the FanTeam one you can predict with a bit more accuracy. So, you know, the likes of Son, Salah, maybe Kevin De Bruyne as well, you can pretty much guarantee they're going to get 2 or 3 shots on target a game, and that's worth some points. And the same occurs with the 90-minute bonus as well. You know, there are particular players you can favour over others for that bonus points. Whereas when you've got this bonus point system in FPL, I'm not sure anyone would ever pick a player based on their potential for bonus points. And then
it's mechanical, isn't it? It's mechanical. Is that the right word? Yeah, we were talking about it off air, weren't we, beforehand? Like, you know, if Son has 3 shots on target, that you're going to get those specific points. You know, if X goalkeeper makes X amount of saves, and you're going to get these points. And then you can start looking up the data behind shots, saves, etc., from each player and position, and that helps guide your decision making for players. And I really like that approach. Obviously, me and Tom both play Sky as well, and that's very, very similar. So it's a really nice crossover. You know where you stand, don't you, with it?
Yeah, and he's made a comment that he seems to think that midfielders seem to favour from it compared to FPL. I think he's probably right, but I would also say that there are some good striker options as well. So Tony last season, he didn't set the world alight, but in FanTeam he was one of the highest scoring strikers just because he played 90 minutes every game. And I think, you know, the likes of Mitrovic maybe might come into that fold, not necessarily because they light the world up, but just because they play 90 minutes every game.
Yeah, he's probably right about the midfielders because you've got, you know, quite a few bonuses chucking around there, haven't you? And that's why we've always
bonus as well, don't you?
Exactly, and that's why we've always put a lot of focus into that midfield area. But I think I know I've spoke to a few people about those forward positions. I think you're right, Tom. That's why I like Ollie Watkins, or have liked Ollie Watkins in the past up front, because he's going to play. You're going to get just an extra point or so for that. And as you alluded to with Tony, ended up being a really nice option last year. I think he will again this year for that reason.
And final question to wrap things up. We've done just over an hour now, so I think that this ends us nicely. He just asks us thoughts on impact of the World Cup break on our long and short-term plans. I've got to be honest, mate, it's similar, for me anyway, it's similar to your answer to the transfer question. I haven't really thought about it. I'm just going to play it as it goes and just see what happens going into the World Cup. The one thought I did have in my head, and it's a tweet that Andy Martin, FPL tactician, put up, who famously did very well last season because he didn't own Mo Salah. He showed a graph that has Salah's performances dropping off towards the second half of the season, which I think we have noticed over the last couple of years. But the thing is with Salah this year is he's got a winter break because he's not playing in the World Cup. So I think he will be such an amazing option after that World Cup when other players are tired, like the likes of Kane, De Bruyne, not Haaland because he's not there either. Another reason why Haaland might be a good option actually. But yeah, the likes of Salah and Haaland not playing at the World Cup could make them good options in January.
Yeah, I think what you want to do here, and I know that I saw this floating around on the Twitter, FPL Twitter the other day, was a list of like players that are very, very good, but are not going to the World Cup. And you think they're potentially, if their starters, going to come in and fire from the off when the game restarts. You're absolutely right there, Tom. I can't argue with what you said, and I'm going to approach it exactly the same. For me, that first block is from now till the World Cup. It's the World Cup, isn't it? Yeah, I had to do a double take then, and then assess what happens, how deep players go into the tournament, potential players that I'm going to be looking at to then do the second half of the season. I think you're right. If England go deep, which we're crap, so we probably won't do, but if we do, then Harry Kane's probably not on, stuff like that. Slow start like we talked about before. After sort of major tournaments and stuff, might be up for consideration. So blocking it and then reassessing during the World Cup.
Cool. I think that ends us quite nicely, mate. Just done an hour and 5 minutes there. Hopefully that was useful for everyone. We went through every single player in FanTeam now, in some, not all in detail, but we've shown every player and commented on every player available at the moment. So yeah, hopefully people have found these couple of videos that we've done useful. And I think next week we're going to try and do one with a special guest. And go through a bit more of our team selection because we haven't really shown many teams yet. So I think that's
I think that would be a good opportunity to look at. Like you said, like near enough final drafts, we'll have more information. We'll have the community shield out of the way. We'll have maybe any more transfers and teams starting to set up prior to the start. I think it'll be a really good one to piece it together. So looking forward to that, Tom, next week, and I think that's going to be, for me anyway, with my team, going to be super valuable. So hopefully it will be for all the listeners as well, especially when they see obviously who's coming on. I think most people will probably know anyway. This has been going on a bit of chat on Twitter, but hopefully to have obviously the previous winner Josh on will be really, really cool, and we can have a look at some drafts between the three of us.
All right, mate. Anything else to add on what we've discussed? I think that covers it nicely myself.
People might need to block out about 5 hours next week for that one. That's all I'm saying. Might have to get going like really early.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It should be good. All right, well, stay tuned, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And give us a like and subscribe on YouTube if you enjoyed it. Cheers, then.